The 911 dispatcher had answered thousands of calls over the years. Most were emergencies, some were misunderstandings, a few were pranks. But one quiet call on a rainy Tuesday night would become the case that nobody in town could ever forget. The call came in at exactly 10:17 p.m. 911, what's your emergency? For several seconds there was only silence. Then a young girl's voice whispered, "Please send help." The dispatcher immediately sat upright. "What's happening? Are you in danger?" Again, silence. The girl sounded terrified. "I can't talk long, he's here." Before the dispatcher could ask another question, the line went dead. Normally, dropped calls happened all the time, but something about the girl's voice felt different. The dispatcher traced the location to a small house in a quiet neighborhood outside town. Officers were sent immediately. At first, nobody expected anything unusual. The address belonged to a man named Robert Langley, a 47-year-old mechanic with no serious criminal record. Neighbors described him as quiet. Nothing seemed suspicious. When officers Daniel Harris and Megan Brooks arrived, the house appeared completely normal. Lights were on. A pickup truck sat in the driveway. The television flickered through the living room window. Officer Harris knocked. A man opened the door. "Can I help you?" "Sir, we received a 911 call from this address." The man looked confused. "That's impossible." "Why?" "I live alone." The officers exchanged glances. The man appeared calm. No signs of panic, no signs of violence, no signs of trouble. Everything seemed normal. Yet something bothered Officer Brooks. The dispatcher had been certain the caller was a child, a frightened child. Brooks asked politely, "Would you mind if we take a quick look around?" The man's smile disappeared. "Do you have a warrant?" Still, his sudden change in attitude raised concern. Officer Harris explained they were simply checking on the welfare of a possible caller. The officers looked around the property from outside. Nothing unusual. No screams, no evidence, no reason to force entry. Eventually, they left. As they drove away, Brooks couldn't stop thinking about the call. Something felt wrong. Back at dispatch, she requested the audio recording. The frightened whisper played through the speakers. "Please send help." Brooks listened repeatedly. Then she noticed something. A faint sound in the background. At first it seemed like static, but after increasing the volume, another noise emerged. A television commercial. A local commercial. One that had aired only 15 minutes before the call. That meant the recording wasn't old. The caller had definitely been inside that house. Brooks felt a chill. If the child had been there, where had she gone? The next morning, detectives began reviewing public records. Robert Langley's history appeared ordinary. Divorced, no children. Yet one detail caught their attention. 3 years earlier, a neighbor had reported hearing a child crying late at night. Officers investigated but found nothing. The complaint had been dismissed. But then another report surfaced. 2 years earlier, a delivery driver claimed he saw a young girl looking through an upstairs window. Again, nothing was found. Detectives decided to revisit the property. This time, they obtained a warrant. When officers arrived that afternoon, Robert Langley was at work. The search began. Room after room appeared normal. Kitchen, bedrooms, bathrooms, garage. Everything looked exactly as expected. For nearly 2 hours, investigators found nothing. Then Officer Brooks entered a storage room near the basement stairs. Boxes lined the walls. Old tools covered shelves. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Then she noticed scratches on the floor. Deep scratches, as though something heavy had been dragged repeatedly. She followed the marks. They ended beneath a large metal cabinet. "Can someone help me move this?" 3 officers pushed. The cabinet slid several inches. Behind it was something nobody expected. A steel door hidden inside the wall. The room instantly fell silent. Nobody knew what was behind it, but every officer felt the same thing. The 911 call had not been a mistake, and whatever was hidden beyond that door was about to change everything. The basement became completely silent. Every officer stared at the hidden steel door. Years of police experience told them this wasn't normal. People didn't build secret doors behind heavy cabinets without a reason. Detectives called for additional units. A locksmith arrived. Minutes later, the lock clicked open. Officer Brooks slowly pulled the door outward. A narrow staircase descended into darkness. A cold draft rose from below. Nobody spoke. Flashlights illuminated the steps. The team carefully moved downward. At the bottom, they found a hidden underground room. The space wasn't large, but what they discovered inside shocked everyone. There was a bed, a desk, books, children's drawings taped to the walls, stuffed animals, blankets. Someone had been living there. Not years ago, recently, very recently. The room was clean, organized, occupied, yet nobody was there. Officer Brooks examined the drawings. Most showed houses, trees, and flowers, but several showed something disturbing. A girl standing behind bars, a man standing nearby. One drawing had a single word written in large letters. Help. Nobody spoke for several moments. Then investigators found something even more alarming. A notebook. The pages appeared to be a diary. The handwriting belonged to a child. The first entries were dated almost 4 years earlier. Detectives read carefully. The writer described being unable to leave, unable to see friends, unable to go outside. The entries became increasingly heartbreaking. Days turned into months, months turned into years. Yet the child continued writing. One page changed everything. I found an old phone. Another page read, I will call 911 when he isn't watching. The room suddenly felt colder. The emergency call had come from here. The girl was real. She had been trapped. But where was she now? Investigators searched the entire property again. This time they discovered a tunnel extending from the hidden room. The passage stretched beneath the backyard. It reached an abandoned storm drain. There, officers found footprints, fresh footprints. Someone had escaped recently, very recently. A statewide search began. Meanwhile, officers arrested Robert Langley at his workplace. When confronted with evidence, he denied everything. The hidden room, he claimed it was a storage area. The diary, he claimed he'd never seen it. The drawings, he had no explanation. Detectives continued questioning him for hours. His story kept changing. Details didn't match. Nothing made sense. Then a breakthrough arrived. Security cameras captured a teenage girl walking alone shortly after the 911 call. The image wasn't perfect, but investigators believed it was their missing victim. Search teams expanded. News coverage exploded nationwide. How could a child disappear for years without anyone knowing? How had she survived? 3 days later, the answer finally arrived. A frightened teenage girl approached a truck driver. She looked exhausted, hungry, terrified. She asked, "Can you call the police?" The driver immediately recognized her photograph. Within minutes, officers arrived. The girl was safe. But her story would leave investigators stunned. What happened inside that room was only part of the truth. The real story was even more shocking. And when detectives learned the full details, they realized the 911 call had exposed a secret nobody could have imagined. The teenage girl sat quietly in an interview room. For years she had lived in fear. Now she was finally safe. Detectives spoke gently, no pressure, no rush. Eventually she began telling her story. Years earlier, she had been taken after becoming separated from family during a crowded community event. The case had gone cold. Evidence disappeared. Leads vanished. Investigators assumed she was gone forever. But she survived. She survived because she never stopped believing someone would find her. Months later, the verdict arrived. Guilty on all major charges. The courtroom remained silent as sentencing was announced. For many, justice had finally arrived. Yet the true hero wasn't a detective. It wasn't a prosecutor. It wasn't a judge. It was a young girl who found an old phone, risked everything, and whispered 3 simple words: "Please send help." Those words changed lives. They solved mysteries, they exposed crimes, and they proved that even in the darkest situations, courage can create hope. Today, the survivor lives a completely different life. She continues her education. She advocates for missing children, and she reminds people everywhere that giving up is never the answer. As for Officer Megan Brooks, she still remembers that call.